audio. Those things are on.
Ready?
Yeah, we're on the presentation though. Go ahead and start the presentation.
Are we streaming? I don't see the little icon on the stream. Oh, preparing live stream.
You had just a sheet of carbon paper, you wrote. Give us a second to get the
presentation.
presentation.
Well, it's still preparing the live stream.
No, I really know that.
Which
was the tail end? So.
Does it normally get stuck on upstairs? Hey, Ray, does it normally get stuck on preparing that? Shouldn't be out there. Apparently not. Oh, we are live. Okay, good. All right. Cool. Well, Eric's. Okay, we go ahead and get started while you're starting up on this. Awesome. All right, welcome everybody to the July 16th, 2024 Sherwood City Council work session. It's a little after 6 p.m. on Tuesday night.
6:30.
Or 6:30, thank you. So we have one work session here, and later on we'll have our regular meeting. Our agenda tonight is an update on the UGB expansion process with Metro. And we're just getting the presentation up here and we'll get going.
There it is. Thank you. Sorry. There it is. Download. Yeah, I'll plug this in a second.
Yes, it is an extremely exciting topic. You're riveted down at this end of the table.
Wait till the movie comes out.
The movie, we don't need tour.
We're gonna start broadcasting in an Apple TV, something.
Just based on your screen on set.
All right. So we have Eric and Bruce and Joy from staff here to talk about the UGB expansion process that we're working through with Metro right now. So Eric, I'm assuming you're going to kick
Yep,
things off.
I'll kick it off. Let me get a full screen here. One more thing. Here. Oh, yeah. Full screen. All right, there we go. Thank you, Mayor Rosner. Let me get my notes out here. So here to talk about Sherwood West and the UGB expansion process, or the urban growth management decision that is currently underway by Metro and the region. Quick check-in on the timeline here. So in April, we submitted the proposal application to Metro. At your direction, we did submit for the entire planning area, 1,300 acres. In May of this year, we made the rounds to the Metro committees and also Metro Council, presented the concept plan. This month in July, the draft urban growth report was released, and I'll go over what that is in just a second, some of the details there. Just kind of as a side note, you know, we as a city have been meeting with stakeholders, property owners, developers, service providers, CWS, Metro, of course, and just talking with people about the next steps in the plan. So that engagement, you know, has not stopped. We've talked with stakeholders that are in support. We've talked with stakeholders that are in opposition, really just, you know, kept in touch with everyone and kept the project moving forward. In terms of next steps, in August of this year, next month, the Metro COO is the chief operating officer, will release a recommendation on our expansion proposal. In September, MPAC, which is the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, and CORE, which is the Committee on Racial Equity at Metro, will give a recommendation on our proposal to the Metro Council. In October of this year, October 1st, actually, the Metro Council will give direction on their intended decision. And then in November, December of this year, and there's potential this will get pushed out to January. I'm not quite sure where that landed, but end of this year, potentially early next year will be the actual public hearings on the expansion proposal. So the draft urban growth report, that is a document that provide. Yeah,
I apologize. I just want to add a little bit more detail. Eric mentioned
Please.
we've been reaching out and talking to some of the groups. We had earlier this week, we had Sam, the executive director at Thousand Friends of Oregon, came out, spent a couple hours with him, gave him a tour, and he's gonna kind of take what we're doing back to his, I think it's his forestry and agricultural committee, and he'd come back and if they have any questions, but you know, I offered that if they want, that group wants to come out, get a presentation and learn more about, you know, all the work we're doing. We'd be more than happy to support that. We've also had multiple meetings with different wineries out there. There's a small group of wineries that kind of banded together in opposition. We've met with them. We've met with farmers from DCLD. So there's a lot of, the approach has been, if there's concerns, we want to hear about it. We want to hear from you. You know, it's like I told some of the wineries, we don't know, like for instance, for our hospitality zone, we don't know what the wine industry looks like from a customer point of view. We don't know what a wine traveler or wine vacationer looks for. And we're going to need their help, you know, in comprehensive planning and master planning, to make sure we get that right. So we really get we're successful in creating this gateway wine country concept. We also, this is public information, but the Winterhawks have taken over the operation of the skating rink. And we met with the owner of the Winterhawks. He wants to come out and visit. He coincidentally owns some wineries around here. So he was also excited about you know, so there might be some synergies there. So we're talking to everyone we can. Eric's been doing, and team have been doing some great work talking to Washington County, you know, looking at different options for affordable housing and stuff as we work toward comprehensive planning. So just a little bit.
Yeah, no, great. Yep. Yeah.
Meaning with Winterhawks, besides the wineries, is they're interested in hotels, obviously, too, that'll be full
Yeah, right.
as they use those.
Yeah, they're very committed to ice hockey in this region. And that was a really exciting meeting.
Yep. Just we're taking a lot of feedback on the way. And I mentioned, you know, getting a lot of good feedback from the metro groups themselves, the roundtable, stakeholder roundtable, a lot of good comments there from diverse groups, Farm Bureau, equity oriented groups. I mean, there's just a lot of good feedback coming on our plan. I think really kind of rounds it out, you know, in terms of this regional perspective. And so we're taking all that feedback, following up on it as necessary and really moving the plan forward. In terms of
Hey, I have one question on the slide previously. I know when we first submitted this, we said that there is another point where we could say, hey, we're not interested in it.
Yeah, I think
Somewhere along there.
I think that October 2024, I really appreciate how Metro has set this up. You can see the check-in in October, Metro Council direction on intended decision.
Great.
And I'll get into in just a second the July meeting. It was actually a week ago today that the Metro Council held a work session and which we sent around. And the council gave early thoughts. And so we have some indication that's what we're going to go over tonight. And then in October, based on what I'm understanding, they should give more information and hopefully a lot of clarity on the intended decision and any potential conditions of approval. And there will be time between that October meeting and the first public hearing for us to debrief as well. And so we can schedule that and debrief on how Metro is seeing things at that time.
Great, okay.
Yeah.
And that would be the point where we could.
Based on comments that we've gotten from staff, we can pull it at any time until they make a final decision. Yeah.
But to be clear, if they put conditions on it that we as a group don't agree with, we can say we don't move forward.
I think that.
They don't want it to be to that point, but in theory,
Right.
if we give them signals that we don't want this condition and they place a condition that we don't support, and if it's a deal breaker, I don't know what that condition might be.
Yeah.
Then then we say, bye-bye, we're not doing it.
I feel like we're in a stronger position if we pull the application versus if they pass in the final public hearing with conditions and then we say, well, we're not gonna move forward. 'Cause we don't like the
We would
conditions.
definitely want to pull it before they
Right.
make a decision.
That's the point I'm trying to.
If it gets to that point,
Right.
yeah.
Right, I just don't, I mean. I don't think they would do any October surprises or November surprises. But again,
Well, one of the reasons we wanted to have this meeting was to, because Eric's gonna go through some of the preliminary things we've been hearing about conditions, to take the temperature of this group as a whole, because it's a group decision. And I'm actually having lunch with Lynn Peterson on Friday, because, you know, just to talk about how do we navigate this, and, you know, I think Lynn and several other Metro councilors hope is we can find some common ground that we can all agree to.
whoever's their extremist on their group should just be put in the corner and work up in the moderate
All right,
proposal.
let's keep,
Yeah, and
If there are some, one or two.
I'm very optimistic that we'll have a clear message on the conditions. I mean, no guarantee, but I'm optimistic we'll have a clear message on what the conditions are likely to be, and then we can make an informed decision before even that first hearing, hopefully. But worse, if it does get to that worst case scenario, I think we can ask Metro staff what that looks like, and also our legal counsel as well, so.
Yes, I want to know that answer. I believe I know the answer, but I want to hear it from staff
Okay.
very clearly before October.
Okay, we'll look into it.
I think it's a very simple answer, but I'll let you just confirm
Okay, we'll look into it. Thanks. So urban growth report, it's a draft. It's a draft that's been released. The comment period is now open on this urban growth report. It's gonna go through August, and I don't have the exact date, but it'll be comment period will be open through August, or part of August. At a very, very high level, I don't want to get into all the details. There's a lot of detail in it, but at a very high level, the Metro did a supply and demand analysis for residential land and employment land. They also did growth projections with a range of different projections, high, medium, low, basically. And they also looked at different growth scenarios. You know, even if we're growing in the high growth rate, do we grow in a more urban form? Do we grow in a more suburban form? And so they looked at different scenarios for growth as well. And basically the outcome of all of that was that there's a range of different needs outside. There's a range of need for housing and employment land. And it could be that a UGB expansion is warranted. Basically, the conclusion was, and I'll just read it, Metro Council has latitude to determine there is a need to add Sherwood West Urban Reserve to the UGB, or take other measures to encourage redevelopment within the urban growth boundary.
The data justifies either decision.
That justifies either decision, correct. And I don't want to get into all the details, but if you guys would like, we can get into all the numbers, but I don't think we need to.
But
I think the takeaway is Metro has the authority to say, discretion to say yes to this or to not,
for the housing side.
for both.
For both, but in terms of, we're just looking at housing numbers, we're gonna get to employment land numbers here as well.
Yeah, and so if they wanted to say yes to our proposal, they could be looking at conditions of approval. They could impose conditions of approval, and
Suggest conditions of approval.
thank you, they can suggest conditions of approval. The condition,
Sometimes, and I'm just being clear.
the types of conditions that they discussed on July 9th, a week ago today. Some of it was around residential land and what that looks like. So housing density, housing type, and housing affordability are all things that they are all conditions they're considering. On the employment land side, they're considering 50-acre lot size minimum. And I don't know.
Just in the North District.
Just in the North District. And I don't know if that, covers the whole thing. Bruce is going to talk a little bit about what that means. How feasible is it? Is it just one lot? Is it two? Is it, three potentially? I'm not quite sure, but we'll need to work out those details.
The way I took the commentary that I heard was, again, this is from the
the electeds, not whatever technical committees talked,
Yep.
but the way I took their comments on this was. Not that they would have a minimum lot size of 50 acres, but that they would want conditions to protect the large lots they didn't get parceled up. That's the way I took their
That's how I
comments.
took it as well.
Not that they would, oh, you can't bring in that parcel because it's only 42 acres.
Right.
I didn't hear that. I heard, we need to make sure we keep the big parcels together.
We don't have,
Again, they weren't specific.
yeah, we don't have any parcels in that north district that are over 50 acres,
No,
right?
we don't.
So it would require assembly,
Assembly.
it would require assembly and then, yeah, so.
Okay, so it's not, it's going beyond, you can't cut up these lots. It's saying the neighbor, the property owners need to work together and assemble larger lots.
Yes.
And it seems like we talked about doing that with our annexation. Right? Did we not for this part?
I feel like we're aligned with Metro
Okay.
on wanting large lots.
Yeah, we want that to pretty much stay a large.
We want assembly. We want to encourage assembly in some way, shape or
But the
form.
question is 50 too large or not large enough? And that's what I think Bruce is gonna tell us, yeah. Will 30 be sufficient for what we're trying to get in that employment area?
I
That's,
think we need some flexibility.
yeah.
We need,
Yeah.
we can't have like hard and fast mandates.
Right, and let's get through. Bruce is gonna talk about implications of 50-acre lot size, but it would, to be clear, it would require assembly because there's nothing there over 50 acres right now.
And just a quick note on the urban growth report, having worked through this with the urban growth report stakeholder group. That report in the way they do the analysis is really constrained by state law. So it's very, you have to be careful about what you use it for. Like, it really doesn't get push-pull. It's, well, yeah, kind of, but where I'm going with this is it doesn't really get into demand. Like, for instance, if your growth rate's been this, they look at things like national, the amount of kids being born is declining, so there's an aging population. So they make a gross assumption that we're not gonna see population growth, and we'd have to completely rely on importing more people to get that growth up, which they don't account for. So they're not, Bruce used a great term on this early in the process. It's not aspirational. It doesn't talk about, okay, what do we need to do to compete with other states and reverse those trends? And this is something that the urban growth round table folks have been really pushing back on them, that they need to put in there. This is what you can't use this report to, because these reports also get weaponized, right? People will say, well, we shouldn't expand because their own study says we're not going to grow, right? But as a great example, if you go back to Metro's last population forecast from, I think it was 2020.
2021.
Yeah, it said Sherwood wouldn't get to like 20,500 people until 2035. Well, we're already past that. So we have to be careful about relying on these reports, and that's a message we've been sending to Metro staff, the Metro counselors, and especially on the employment land side, because I don't know, did you show the employment land slide?
We're
not there yet, not there.
So another thing that one of the Metro counselors said on the call, which I thought was very along these lines, is all of these studies are looking at Metro as one big region, and they're not looking at the individual factor, like Southwest Washington County, the area we're in.
Yeah.
The growth is very different than what you're seeing out in Gresham or Troutdale or whatnot, and that's what one of the counselors pointed out.
Yeah, and the business needs and everything else are different, absolutely.
And just one last comment on the housing side, just to give you an example of what I'm talking about. If you dig into the analytics they did, they had 3 lot sizes for the zoning. The largest lot size that they considered like large lot was 2,500 square feet and above.
Large.
Large, that was large. So everything above that was large
Mine
lot. So you can imagine when you start doing the math, that really overestimates the capacity for the region to absorb new people with the current boundaries. So just, you gotta take all this with a grain of
On
salt.
the other thing in the UGR where they talk about, even though it says really that there's not a need for industrial. The person who was presenting there and at WCC said, however, Sherwood has large lots that aren't available elsewhere that are flat and ready.
Which would be our Sherwood West.
They did a great job, I thought, at the council meeting of how highlighting the fact that if you look at industrial land as a whole, there's not a need. If you actually just segment out large lots, there's a huge need, and everyone seemed on board with that.
Yes.
Okay,
And kudos for Metro staff for recognizing that this is an issue and commissioning this Sherwood specific study.
Yes.
So we really can't think of it.
Yep. And again, you know, the work that Metro staff did, I think, you know, led to a ability to say yes for the Metro Council to say yes to the proposal, again, with suggested or potential conditions. The last condition that has been discussed a bit is around public engagement. And specifically, there's some concern about equity-oriented engagement in the next planning phase. So those are the three, and we'll get into details on the first two. So I just wanted to provide some context for our concept plan relative to other concept plans. This is some analysis that staff here at the city has done. Just understanding, you know, well, how do we compare to other recent concept plan proposals? So just starting at the top, Frog Pond in Wilsonville, their average net density. So this would be taking the residential land within that concept plan and then looking at the average net density. So 6.9 acres is what Frog Pond was at. Sherwood West is at 9.2. Cooper Mountain is at, and this is all of Cooper Mountain, all of the spaces
per acre.
per acre. Yes, thank you. 11.2 units per acre. And then River Terrace 2.0 is at 13.5 units per acre. River Terrace 1.0 was around 11 to 12 units per acre.
Well, ours doesn't sound unreasonable.
Ours is higher than some that have been previously proposed and approved, and lower than others. When you look at
our 340 acreage, that does not include any of the park property, right?
that's a detail that I'm not sure about, and there's a lot of nuance in these densities. But we can check on that. But so I take this with a grain of salt in terms of.
So I'll ignore the number of acres and we'll just talk about your average density. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, and these concept plans are all put together slightly differently. And so, you know, I see these as general numbers, right? But they're, I think, close enough, accurate enough for discussion purposes. And then when we look at the unit type breakdown, which is also another potential condition that Metro is considering. Frog Pond was approved at 100% single family, no middle housing, no multifamily. Sherwood West is at 57% single family, 18% middle housing, 25% multifamily. Cooper Mountain, 55% single family, 26 middle, and 19 multifamily. River Terrace was approved without any specific details on unit breakdown. They did really lean into, this is River Terrace, they really did lean into affordability, middle housing, things like that, but they did not provide, as far as I can tell, specifics on unit breakdown. So that's just how we compare it.
And all three of those were approved prior to the recent legislation that's. The allowable.
No, the River Terrace 2.0
Is
was,
newer.
2023.
But that's the one
that was the swap.
Yeah.
Are you talking middle housing or?
You live in housing stuff.
So, yeah, I mean, thank you for bringing that up. There is a nuance there. And I did ask Metro staff yesterday about, you know, how basically the conditions of approval and if they went beyond the proposed plan, basically. And the answer was generally they conformed, you know, the conditions reinforced the proposal, meaning they didn't go beyond. The only exception to that was the Metro Council in 2018 did require that they knew that HB 2001 was coming, and it was very clear that HB 2001 was going to pass. And so they put a condition in there that basically was compatible with HB 2001. Yeah, basically. So was the beyond. But for the most part, it was reinforcing the proposal, not going beyond it.
Can you go back one slide real quick? The other thing I like about this is, if you look at the combined, in our proposal, the combined middle and multifamily being 43%. Their own slides showed their need or whatever, however they want to define it, at 46%. So like, we're right on track with what their own recommendations seems to be.
Yep. And then I want to just give you guys, give you some examples of different densities and so we can visualize and understand what these conditions might mean.
And for clarity, when you're doing units per acre. You're taking a fairly large number of acreages that have roads in it, so that you're counting. You're not just saying, hey, here's a 1 acre thing of whatever, because you got to take into account the roads.
And
Net.
we're talking net density is
That's fact.
what should be assumed. Is when we say density, it should be net density. So it takes out roads.
Roads right away.
Roads and environmental constraints, and then parks go either way based on the definition.
And Metro was on that definition.
The metro definition includes exclusion of right-of-way, environmentally constrained areas and public parks in their definition.
Okay.
From that. There's a little bit more nuance to that, slopes, there's some detail in there, because generally that's what's taken out.
Give Metro a moment of praise. That's been a legislative thing, not a Metro thing.
So, when we talk density, what are we looking at? And these are images from a book called Visualizing Density. It's a little dated, full disclosure. So the images are going to be a little dated, but it's, I think, a pretty good example across the board. 7 units per acre. The example I'll point out is Hillsborough here, kind of a typical, single family detached. And that's at 7.1 units per acre.
For context, Woodhaven's probably 6 to 7.
6 to 7, right? Average lot size at 7 units per acre is a 6,200 square foot lot. 10 units per acre, there is an example here at Lake Oswego, some townhomes, and at 10 units per acre, your average lot size is 4,300 square feet. Moving up the scale, if we're getting into 12 and 13 units per acre, average lot size is 3,300 square feet. And you do start to get into, apartment type units. The missing middle can be in this range at times, a little bit more dense missing middle, but it can be in this range. But historic development has been in apartment type complexes. So, fairly typical suburban apartment complex in Arizona is at 12.7 units per acre. And then as we get even higher in the 18 units per acre, this would be in our multifamily zone. Our multifamily zone is 16 to 24, so it's pretty squarely within this, and that gets you to about 2,400 square feet per unit. So we don't know exactly what Metro is thinking. Informally, we've heard 13 all the way up to 18 units per acre. And so we really don't know where that's at, but I think a good starting point for discussion is probably in this 12 to 13 range, at an average lot size of 33.
Wait, further condition?
Yes.
So just to put that in context, so I had a conversation with one of the Metro counselors who suggested 13. For me, that's too high on average. Obviously, you'd have
So there's a lot of areas that are way higher.
Right, and then in one of the early meetings, a Metro counselor threw out the number 18. So.
It's a non-starter.
So, yeah, my concern with those really high density ones, especially apartments, is that is not putting people on the path to home ownership. In the way, let's be creative and figure out, and by the way, there's a total need for them in our area. But let's look specifically at Sherwood, where we don't have a major transportation hub. We don't have, a lot of that infrastructure, and say, okay, but can we get affordable housing for, young families and aging in place and different things like that that are really focused on more of a suburban living that is not, yeah.
To me, it's more about the blend, right? Like, we will absolutely have apartment buildings in Sherwood West. We will
Right.
have,
As we have
areas,
zoned in our.
right, we will have areas that probably go up to 24 units per acre. But the idea that the entire thing is gonna average 18, that doesn't match the reality of what's even possible here from a transit
Yeah.
infrastructure perspective.
Well, and additionally, I don't think it accomplishes our goal where we're trying to solidify our schools and everything else by having people put down roots because they have the ability to get on that path to homeownership if we just have, anyway.
I don't want to cut you off. I think
No,
this
about
slide
that.
will help.
Okay.
And so I think it'll help the conversation. And we're running short on time, so I'm going to talk quickly.
We can start our next meeting late.
Okay, so this is just an exercise, to show you kind of how this may play out if we add 12 to 13 units per acre. I've taken, the current proposal, and you can see we're at 9.2 units per acre. We have, all of our different zones here, and then the number of units, the total net residential land is 340 acres. You just divide our total units by this and you get our net density, which is at 9.2. So if we added, we would need, in order to get to 12 to 13 units per acre, we would need to add approximately 1,200 units to the plan somewhere.
Or reduce the number of acres.
Well, either way,
Yes.
you're still getting the same
Thank
density.
you. Thank you. Let's assume that we
I'm okay with that.
don't
More
change.
industrial.
Let's assume that we keep the same amount of residential land net. How do we get to that density? So 1,200 units would get us there. I broke it up just as an example, broke it up evenly between all the 6 zones. So you just add 200 to the total and then get revised density. So our multifamily, instead of being at 16.8 to 24, and this is average, comes out to 30. Our middle housing goes from 5.5 to 11 to 23. Cottage cluster goes from 12.8 to 16 to 24, and onwards. And I think the way to look at this is, depending on how much land we had in acreage, that the additional 200 units really matters with the density based on how much land we had originally in that.
I mean, the other way to do this, instead of changing the density range of the types, is to change the acreage mix of the types.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
which is what you didn't illustrate here.
Yep.
But to me, it doesn't matter because this is a total non-starter. for
When
me.
you say that, you mean like less the single family, more multi, more.
Yeah, so you, instead of having 33 acres multifamily, maybe you have 50, right? And you have more middle housing, more, like the things that are higher density have more acreage dedicated to, and the things that are lower density have less. But to me, like, I sat on the CAC. We spent an enormous amount of time on this, and quite frankly, we started a lot lower than 9.2, and getting to 9.2 required a lot of compromising and a lot of work.
Yes.
I'm laughing my way away from 12 points. This isn't for me, this is a hard pass, a pull the application.
And not what our.
I'll go to 10 at most. I'm really not interested in any of this nonsense. Personally, but that's one of them.
And I think that, I like your idea though of adjusting the acreage, essentially, right? We can be creative on the type of housing, and again, we're saying, we're not solving the whole housing crisis with this thing, we're just taking a bite out of it. And it is providing the cottage clusters in a way so that we can see what that does for housing prices and stuff like that to provide that, but it's not gonna be, I hope they're not saying, hey, this is to solve the housing crisis across Oregon, because that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to, well, even across the metro region, that can't be put on Sherwood. We're a draw to a very specific group of people. And that only includes half of my children that want to live here. Some want to live in urban environments. They want to live down other, you know what I mean? And so I'm worried that by trying to say, hey, we need to expand it to this, this thing, it becomes a non-workable thing versus I'd rather have something than nothing. And so I really like to be creative. And when you say talk with the stakeholders and all these different groups and businesses, we love doing that. We want to be good partners on this, but we can't have our hands tied on that to say, oh, it has to be this or else,
This is where if there's gonna, I think of conditions, there's aspirational conditions versus
oh, yeah.
versus mandates. And if you look at how they've done conditions in the past, it's been this many housing units. So we have to really, even how it's written, like if we're gonna change the amount of land, it has to be more based on a number per acre average or something like that. If we can get to a compromise.
Yeah, I think so.
Are we ready to move on to
Any
employment?
other questions on housing?
But just to be clear, I'm not suggesting we adjust the acres to get to the 12.7 or between 12 and 13 targets. I'm saying that's another way you could illustrate and accomplish
Yes.
that goal.
Yep.
I'm not interested in either one.
Okay,
I'm not interested in raising our density plan very much at all.
Can, and just before we move on, just kind of take the temperature, everyone in the room on where they're at on that. Keith? In terms of density.
Devil's in the details and. But I'm not so much a fan of the. I would be more supportive of a range with aspirational. And I'd be more in favor of. Yeah, either a range or potentially. A specific target number. You know, in the area. There's not a lot of room to budge off of the proposal.
9.2.
I mean, we can go. I mean, so part of the collective challenge of this whole mess is, you know, we ask, we're gonna go down the path of master planning. Now, hopefully that is indeed the path that we stay on. People can change their mind or have their perspective. Some housing types requires mass transit. We don't control mass transit.
Yep, we aren't getting any time soon.
And without having mass transit, it that severely impacts the opportunity.
Renee, did you have any thoughts?
I would be in favor of more middle housing, more affordable type housing. However, to Keith's point, to truly get to where I think Beth was trying to get us to go to, they have to be able to get us more transportation out here.
we're probably infrastructure period, right?
Correct.
Help us with the sewage, help us with the, you know.
It sounds like they're wanting an urban area in the suburbs, and that's not what Sherwood is wanting to be. So the years that we've, like Doug was saying, put into this to get to this doesn't match what Metro's wanting. It seems like.
Yeah, and I'm sure the point's been made by staff and the mayor and others that have talked with people. We are a very dense community. Compared to our Tualatin, Beaverton, Tigard, Portland, we are a very dense community because it's so new and it was all built really since the mid-90s forward, when the lots were considerably smaller than historically in all the other towns. So we're already doing a pretty darn good job. We need more variety. We're advocating a lot more variety. I think they should be very excited about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't Portlandize Sherwood, that's urban. But I mean, it's frustrating because we put so much time, years, like 2 UGBF cycles that we put all this work in, and was very intentional to make sure that we got the different types of housing that are needed. Multi-family, cottage cluster, single family residential, which could include duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. I mean, we have a lot of options. And quite honestly, I think if we increased the density, we'll have a revolt out of our community, and that's not what they want. So,
Well, and to Keith's point, we actually go the other direction on variety of housing.
Yep.
Now we go to all the same kind of housing and it's all apartments, right? We need a place where when my kids are done with school and I don't want to take care of my home anymore, I don't have to leave the community. All my friends and everything, all my things are here. I need to be able to go to a smaller home and stay in Sherwood or even in my neighborhood.
but not necessarily an apartment.
Right, but I literally have a woman who's been in Sherwood for 50 years and she sold her house. She said, I couldn't find anything. And so I can't remember where it was, but she moved because she could not find the type of housing she was looking for in Sherwood. And she goes, yeah, it's really sad saying goodbye to all my friends and blah, blah. And it's like, Yeah, we've got to have that variety or else we're losing these people who are assets to our whole communities.
I think fundamentally, the challenge is, the issue I see here is it goes back to the idea, the notion that somehow the entire metro region should look the same, be the same, like it's
Yeah.
not, it doesn't match reality at all.
Yeah.
But that seems to be the aspirational goal being pushed by some people, including some people on Metro Council, and it's a fantasy. You can try to make an apple an orange, but it'll never be an orange, right? We're surrounded by farmland, we're on the literal border of Metro.
Yeah.
Right, we're surrounded by rural areas, certainly by the edge of suburbia. And thinking that you can push the type of density you're gonna see in inner Portland, inner Hillsborough, along these transit corridors is nonsensical. It's nonsense, and it's just ridiculous.
I'm of the same mind. We put a lot of work into this. We've got a lot of community buy-in to that long process and.
And by the way, Metro was involved all along the way in helping us form this plan. They have been involved to staff this. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, anyways.
Great. Yeah, no, I think, thank you for that feedback. And now we're gonna talk really quickly about employment, land uses, turn it over to Bruce, who's gonna talk about 50 acres and what that means for us.
So I don't know for a fact that Metro is going to propose a mandatory 50-acre minimum. I mean, we've heard some of this conversation. I think a lot of people may have heard different things. And so it's great that I have an opportunity to comment on this very briefly. I think Eric's slide says a lot. In essence, it really shows that well, it doesn't totally show because you don't see the numbers. On the west side of Elward, there's smaller parcels. On the east side, there's the larger parcels. And we really do need both because there's a need for smaller sites. I mean, I have people asking me, where's there 10 acres to buy, just 10 acres to buy for a single business? And we don't really have it. So that's one thing. On the other side, we have the opportunity for larger businesses to locate. But also you can do larger buildings, which can allow for smaller businesses to locate in larger tenant spaces. And I want to say that in Sherwood West, the North District, we can achieve 50 acres. We can achieve more than 50 acres. So that's all very possible. I think there are some significant economic benefits both to the city and, this is a metro program. So for the region as a whole, for the larger lots that we've got, south of Sherwood and east of Elward.
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
Have any of the parcels west of Elward too?
Well, so I think there's maybe a 19-acre. I don't know that I have it in front of me.
I mean, they look similar size on here to me, so that's why.
Well, you can't see, there's a lot of parcelization on the west side.
Okay.
So, but there's some that are like, my vague recollection is 3 acres, 10 acres, that kind of thing without.
If we're talking about assembly,
Look it
there
up.
could be assembly to get towards.
You could assemble on the west side also, and I think you are gonna see some assembly. It's just gonna be a little bit more challenging, but you'll probably still have some smaller parcels. That's my guess over time. So I just want to emphasize again, I do see the opportunity, particularly east of Elward, for larger parcel size. And I think the benefit of that is better master planning. You have the potential for campuses or whatever could be developed in this particular case that would meet our target advanced manufacturing and tech industries. But I think there are some potential implications if there is a condition to mandate a minimum 50 acres. And that really relates to the fact that you're going to have to, as you talked about a little while ago, you're going to have assembly. It's going to have to be private assembly. Assembly can be very challenging. It can be done, but it can be very challenging. I suspect that what it also could mean is if you do need to assemble more properties to make a minimum 50 acres on the east side, it's going to take additional time to do that, which means the developments could get delayed. It's all could, we don't know for a fact. You could have a situation where the costs go up because you don't know what the land prices are going to be. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but when costs go up, lease rates sometimes go up to reflect that. That may or may not happen, but we've seen a tremendous increase in lease rates in this region over the last few years. And I think one example of it, and I think if we go back to the last slide for just a second, The largest parcel, single parcel is the 36 acres right at the corner of Sherwood and Roy Rogers. That is a single parcel. So to get to 50 acres, they'd have to buy, let's say, 32 acres or some of the 32 acres on the south, or they'd have to start acquiring the 21 acres to the west. You know, that kind of thing is going to happen. That can be challenging. And that's the only thing I wanted to say about that. So,
I would add
Yeah.
relative to some other areas in the metro region, we're dealing with a handful of properties, where
Right.
there's other areas
right.
where it's potential for 50 acres, but it's like 40.
I mean, this,
Owners,
right,
yeah.
this does have the potential because of that very statement for larger development to take place in this area. You could, I guess in theory, or maybe in actuality, you could assemble 36, 32, 21, 19, whatever, and you can get to some pretty good sized parcels. But I think the challenge is, do we want to have it mandated if in fact that's what the Metro Council proposes? And again, I don't know that. Now, I wanted to go back for just a second to the McKinsey report. Yes.
Given the choice of types of mandates. The one we just talked about where we gave big pushback versus this one. I'm very much more supportive of.
I'd like some flexibility because the conditions change, right? But I would personally. If this developed and all these parcels developed individually, I would look at that as a massive failure. So I would like help from Metro to encourage larger. You know, potentially way more beneficial, like campus-like development, like you're talking about, Bruce, but but we have to toe the line between. That and if it's a straight up mandate that then ends up sitting undevelopable, right? Like,
Right.
there's gotta be flexibility with something that pushes us towards hopefully assembly and a really cool. Unique
But
region-wide opportunity.
Name of property owner, I know has to be. Yeah, you know, so I'm okay with.
Yeah, so with the flexibility, what you're saying is, they put together 49 acres and they have a perfect opportunity for us. We want to be able to say yes.
They
though.
can't develop.
I know, but that's the flexibility we want, right? I don't want to be held hostage by, oh, well, we keep.
It could be the element, so, okay, we're not quite at that number, but this is the concept.
Yeah,
And so because this concept is so rocking awesome, this manufacturer, blah, 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 or whatever, then you say, okay, then that tips the
so just give
scale.
us some range or some sort of yeah, and then I also on,
Or it could just be aspirational, it could just be, we develop the plan, the comprehensive plan with. The intent to keep these parcels together and to even assemble them for bigger outcomes. But not make it a hard and fast requirement, right? But but you gotta have some teeth too, so I don't know what that looks
yeah,
like.
I'm not as interested in the, okay, but we're gonna break it apart into a bunch of little things to try to develop because we're trying to make this a hub on the edge of the city kind of a thing. And just also for those that are listening, industrial, we're thinking more high-tech park versus coal mine, right?
Mine is not on the target list.
Right.
But besides the point, no mining,
Yeah.
nothing of that sort.
We're not really interested in storage.
Yeah.
We're not in storage.
Yeah.
Accelerating.
So,
Sorry.
I apologize, we're running really long. I just want to make sure the councilors get a chance to, council president.
Oh, no, I'm good. I think whatever the conditions are with some flexibility.
Yeah, I agree. This is much easier to go along with than not housing density.
Gotcha, Renee.
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well.
Carrie weighed in, so, okay.
Ultimately, we have the same goal as.
Yeah, very perfect.
It's
Yeah,
how we get to there.
yeah, right.
I think then just to recap, we will continue to track this really closely. October is when we should get really clear direction, but I think staff and electeds will continue to be chipping away at that. And you guys. Thank you.
Everybody, we'll go ahead and adjourn our work session and we'll take 5 minutes. We'll start our regular meeting.